What's up, everybody? Arael Avinu here with Fully Deconverted, and today we're going to be talking to Suris the Skeptic. But before we do, I want to let you know who we got on for the rest of the week, which is Sally Hunt. She's a progressive atheist. So if you don't know who she is, go check out a little bit of her material. Up next week is Bart Campolo and Jim Helton and family. If you know Jim Helton, you've probably seen his daughter. So we'll be having them on next week as well. If you want to see who we're having on, go check out fullydeconverted.com. You can scroll through, see who we got for that month. If you see somebody that you want to have an interview or see an interview had with, then make sure to contact fullydeconverted.com, and we'll make contact with that person and see if we can strike something up. With that said, Suris, over to you. What does it mean to be skeptical? You are Suris the Skeptic. What does it mean to be skeptical, and why would attacking the ideas that people believe adds value to their life be a vocation that benefits society? This just sounds like you're trying to mix up the pot. What's going on there?
So to me, there's a difference. There's a fundamental difference between, there's an inside joke we have in the atheist YouTube community between skeptic and skeptic trademark.
Yeah.
For anybody who's, I don't want to throw any channel under the bus, but there is a channel that does use the whole skeptic trademark thing. And I think the joke between the two is there's a difference between saying, I'm an atheist, therefore I'm a skeptic, versus saying, I'm a skeptic, because you can be a religious skeptic. You can be an atheistic skeptic. You can be, being a skeptic is simply, if somebody comes to me with a claim, I will typically not take that claim at face value, much to the chagrin of people who are very near and dear to me, to my lives, because I'm sure my girlfriend has been very agitated that I will sit there and Google things in the middle of conversations. And being a skeptic does not necessarily mean that you are actually trying to attack anybody's near and dear held beliefs, but it does mean that you personally are not accepting them. For instance, I don't accept any religion as mine. I don't tell anybody that their religion is automatically false and they can't have it, but I will tell them that you have not provided me with sufficient evidence in order to believe it. If that's what they personally need to comfort them, that's their own business, as long as their own business does not harm any others. And unfortunately, we do see with religion that does actually happen sometimes. And when that happens, I will fully attack the ideas. But I won't attack the ideas simply because I'm a skeptic. I'll attack the ideas because I see harm.
Okay, so when, just the fact of Christians, let's say, existing, you don't go out of your way to feel like you have anything to prove there. But then let's say when politicians start getting elected solely on the criteria, the underwriting criteria, that they are professing Christians, then you might feel a cause to speak out about this publicly?
At that point, yes, definitely. If, for instance, if I came at you and I said, my platform is I have a religion, I have a belief system, I don't think that's enough of a platform to really support anybody, especially because if the platform is I have a religion, now the only reason that you're getting hired or you're getting elected is that 83.7% of the population just so happen to share your religion, even if they necessarily share your particular flavor of the religion. So for instance, if I go up on a platform and I say, I'm a godly man, and people go, he's a godly man, and they start supporting me, for all they know, I could be Hindu. I could be a Muslim. I could be a flavor of Christianity they don't believe in. They could be an incredibly deep-set fundamental Baptist and have an issue with Catholicism, and I could be Catholic. And by the sheer statement of me saying I'm a godly man, that could get me elected under a completely false pretense, which I know politicians do that all the time. You and I both would probably agree that several times politicians are completely taken on under false pretense. But I don't agree with it. I don't think it's a good idea to. So, and then especially if I were to say, well, I'm this particular brand of Christianity, and you should take me into office because of that. Well, what does me being that particular brand of Christian even mean? What kind of policies am I actually going to enact? And am I going to enact policies based on my Christianity? Because if that's the case, and I'm, say, an independent Baptist, much like your Stephen Andersons are, then the fact that I'm a Christian might actually cause a lot of harm to society. It's not just because I'm a Christian, but if I start enacting laws as a result of that, then there's going to be issues. And so, yes, if somebody did say that their political standpoint is the fact that they are a Christian, I'm going to call into question what kind of Christian they are. And after I call into question what kind of Christian they are, I'm definitely going to call into question what are the implications of that brand of Christianity. And is it even a good idea to hire this person in the first place because of those implications? Because I'm sorry, the fact that you hold to a religion tells me almost nothing about your stance politically.
Yeah. Well, some people think that, you need to be a godly Christian ruler in order to know God's will for that nation. And if you're a Christian, why doubt that? Why is that not a good idea? After all, Suris, I've sat in countless years of groups of people who say there is basically only one criteria by which we should elect government officials. And, depending on what that group was the reason that they mentioned. Most of the time it's abortion. If the politician says no to abortion, or they lean that direction, they can have whatever other political agenda they want, but that's the candidate we're voting for. And then on the other side, sometimes all they have to say is they're a Christian. Now, if anybody's tuning into this broadcast right now, it's no real surprise that you and I don't really go the religious direction. But with that said, the platform that I promote is Fully Deconverted. The D has a slash through it, so we have Christians in there as well on Facebook. It's a discussion group. And we use that to promote discourse on religious and secular values. And I can tell you what I get the most when I have conversations with Christians is, Suris, because it's written in the Bible, it is therefore true. Why is this a bad stance to take, and how could skepticism see our way out of that?
So the difference between being if you are skeptical about the Bible, and the reason this will cause you to have a different approach to something than, say, if you were, I don't want to use the term indoctrinated, because there are some Christians that aren't indoctrinated. They just chose it as their religion after a while. In fact, a channel I was on for an interview with a little while ago grew up as an atheist and became a Christian later. So I don't want to use the term indoctrinated for all of them. If you say that everything that comes out of the Bible is good, you have to accept everything within that bag of beliefs. And there's where you start to have problems, because there's a lot of baggage with accepting everything in the Bible is good. So if I say everything in the Bible is good, and then I point out, say, Levitical law, anybody who's familiar with old Levitical law knows about its justifications for slavery, its justifications for racism, because I'm sorry, taking slaves from nations that are not yours and having different stipulations for people within your own nation is a form of racism. Its views on rape, there's nowhere in the Bible that it says not to rape. If you are going to take that entire bag of beliefs and say that, oh, this is all good, well, no, it's not. And if you then have to give a caveat, oh, well, actually, I believe in everything from the new covenant. First of all, you don't believe the entire book is all good now, because there are things in the older covenant that are now not good that you don't want to espouse. Secondly, even things in the new covenant are not good. Again, there's no point where Jesus specifically says that you should not own slaves. In fact, actually, his exact words to slaves are, obey your masters, especially if they're Christian.
Yeah.
So even then, when somebody says, well, I want to espouse the things in the new covenant, well, the new covenant isn't necessarily all that much better than the old covenant, especially when it comes to more recent issues. We're only, we're not that many years and generations away from when America had slavery, and the Bible was used to justify slavery as well as used to justify reasons to free people from the slave trade as well. But if that bag of beliefs can espouse these things that we as modern day humans believe are abhorrent, then why should we use the book as an objective moral framework? Whereas instead we could then do, as a moral anti-realist, I think that for the most part, ethics are subjective to the individual, morality is agreed upon by the group. Why can't we then formulate a morality as a group of people, 350 million Americans? Why can't we then, as a group of people, form a code of ethics that we know will work better for multiple people when, one, there's 17% of the nation that's not Christian, and two, even the Christians who are Christian don't all believe in everything in the Bible. A lot of them will not say that, oh, slavery is good. I know that there are some that will, but for the most part, they don't. So why should we use that objective moral framework? I think using it's almost a little dangerous, because as soon as you use it as the objective moral framework, you have to accept a lot more baggage than I think people are comfortable with.
Suris, it sounds like you're saying that Christians don't even know their own Bible.
A lot of times they don't. I'm not saying all the time, but there is definitely a large subset of Christians who don't even read their Bible all that often. A lot of them will take what they've heard their pastor say and use that. For instance, in my family, and I recognize this is anecdotal and therefore doesn't hold a lot of weight, but in the church that my family grew up in, they were actually told that the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were evil and of the devil. In my private school that I grew up in, because I grew up in a young earth creationist Christian private school, non-denominational, I was sent a letter in the first grade that said that if you let your children read, play, or watch Pokemon, they'll burn in hell. So,
I love it when I hear things like that, because I'm just waiting for the reason why.
and none of that, you can't justify any of that in the Bible. But for instance, the Pokemon thing, the only way that somebody could justify it is say that, well, look at Leviathan and Behemoth in the book of Job. They're monsters, therefore anything that has the word monster in it must automatically be evil. That's why we have the connotation monster for people as a moniker that says that they're evil. That's a really wishy-washy position. That can't really get you anywhere. And so I will say that a lot of what happens with, especially with pastors, is they'll take passages in the Bible and make them incredibly malleable so that they can actually say whatever message they want to say, because you can make the Bible be a very hateful book, or you can make the Bible be a very loving book. It just depends on how you want to read it. For instance, if you take the passages from Romans and Leviticus that are about homosexuality, you can make it say something incredibly homophobic. But if you translate them back into Greek and Hebrew, you then have completely different passages that are more about pedastry or more about ritual sex or paganism. Mm-hmm. They can be translated in a myriad of ways, and a pastor can translate them any way they want because they get to control the narrative. And a lot of Christians, instead of reading their own Bible, they'll take the narrative that their pastor gives them, and therein lies the issue. Also, we have a question in the audience from Kevin Waddy, if you don't mind me answering it.
Go for it.
He said to please describe a moral anti-realist. So a moral anti-realist is somebody who takes the position, or moral anti-realism is an umbrella term for morality that doesn't take the position that objective morals are true or subjective morals are true. So for instance, for me, I subscribe to something that's a little more akin to what's called error theory. And with error theory, you say that moral subjectivism and moral objectivism don't necessarily hold true. For instance, if somebody tells me that objective morality doesn't exist, I can tell them, well, objective morality only cares about having an objective moral framework. That framework need not be a deity. That framework can be anything. Mm-hmm. If somebody tells me that morality is objective in all case, well, no, it's not. Even divine command theory, which is probably the most objective moral framework someone can come up with, technically falls under ethical subjectivism, because it's contingent on the mind of a creator. Mm-hmm. So that's why I kind of subscribe more to moral error theory, is I can assign points to both and say that there are points where objective morality is right and points where subjective morality is right, but I cannot ascribe 100% to either one of them, because I don't think that it's true. I don't think that either one of them have the entire story.
Since we're talking about morality, why don't humans have the same morality as their God, in whose image they're made? I don't know if you ever thought about that from quite that angle, from their perspective, or perhaps your former perspective, if you were once a theist. But I know the idea of sin comes in here. I didn't want to say sin in my question, though.
Fair enough. So I know that the theistic answer to that is we live in a fallen world, therefore we'll have fallen morality that will be juxtaposed to God's morality, not necessarily a mirror image of it. Yeah. That would be the theistic answer. The answer that I would come up with is, well, I'm not God, therefore my moral code's not exactly going to be the same thing. Even if he did exist, it doesn't mean that I have to have the same morals as him.
That's a very nuanced position to kind of announce. Why not? I mean, especially if you have a creator deity and he's looking at his creations and the creation is looking at God, sure, we might offhandedly make the observation that, there's kind of different rules for God and for us on how we play the game in which we find ourselves. But why might that not necessarily translate into we have the same morality? And whatever your response is, would that be the case with a Christian deity?
So my personal view is that, again, ethics are to the subject and morality is agreed upon by the group. It's group consensus. If the subject, and this is why divine command theory actually follows under ethical subjectivism, you can look it up in philosophy books like the Stanford Book of Philosophy, and you'll find that it falls under there. It's really weird that it does, because it's an objective moral framework. You'll find that even though the morality of the subject, so the morality of God, has one set of rules, for morality to be morality, it must be agreed upon by a group of some size. And if that group does not include God, we now have two different sets of morality in any case.
Well, there you go. So that's it in a nutshell. But I feel like if a Christian heard you say that just now, they're going to think they're in the same group as God. What differentiates them? So, is it just the fact that they don't need the same things, they don't have the same desires, and they don't share the same resources, and therefore they don't have to agree on the same things, and that's it, and that's what separates morality? Because I just don't think a Christian is going to put that in their sack lunch and walk away with it.
They're probably not going to, but that's again where I fall under as a bit of a moral error theorist. So a Christian is going to typically believe in objective morality, where their objective moral framework is going to be one of two things. Their objective moral framework is either going to be the Bible, which is dangerous, or God, which I have a few friends that don't believe a lick of the Bible, but 100% believe that God and Jesus are real beings, and the Bible is just a complete mess. That has nothing to do with them. It just tries its best. So if you have the moral stance that your objective morality stems from God, whatever interpretation of God you have is going to be where your morality stems from. If you think that God is homophobic, then you're probably going to take the stance that, oh, well, I don't have a problem with homosexuals, but God does. And so, go down that line. I'm sure you've probably heard that at least once or twice. Or if you have somebody that says, well, my morality comes from the Bible, then instead if you ask for justification for something, they'll give you a Bible verse, and they'll say, well, in Romans, insert verse and passage here, this is what it says here, so this is what I believe. They use the Bible or God as a descriptor for their morality instead of making their morality be prescriptive in and of themselves. So they're probably not going to take that as a sack lunch and walk there, because for them, they have an objective moral framework and they choose to put it in somewhere that I don't. Granted, again, this is where, like I said in the beginning of the interview, if somebody's moral framework is causing them to cause harm of some kind, there's where I will get involved, and there's where I will start to hold issue. If it's not causing harm, then for me, your objective moral framework can be the ethics of the stars group from the Resident Evil series, for all I care. To me, it's fiction in both ways, but if that's where you set your objective moral framework, if that's where your objective standard is, by all means, as long as you're not doing any harm to somebody. Unfortunately, especially with religion, we don't see that that's the case all the time.
Yeah, you mentioned something earlier about ministers or persons in position of power in religion crafting narratives, and the audience can take and base their morality off of the narrative that's being shaped for them and given to them, especially if they're already professing belief or they have incentive to say that they believe, subscribe, or conform to the culture of the faith-based community that they find themselves in. And speaking of crafting narratives, I have some personal experience in this. I used to be a filmmaker for a church that if we ended up doing like a documentary, interviews, or something like that, and the narrative didn't quite fit what we wanted our faith audience to receive, I acted as an editor in that circumstance. So while that might be an example of something maybe a little bit more subtle, it actually influences and creates a change in what we perceive to be doctrine or what the Bible is saying. And if we can do that, then we can change your behavior. And if we can change your behavior in a significant way, like let's say a vote, and then it's not just us doing it, but it's the entire kind of Christian population across a nation doing it. Now we control who's the elected leader and what's the future of our nation based on the fact that we can craft and change narratives to fit simply what we want it to be, what we want our audience to receive a message. So crafting narratives is real. For all you guys that don't know, this happens very intentionally, by the way. And I've spoken to numerous pastors, ministers who have consciously taken that role while on stage or behind the pulpit to do that. And it's funny that it never comes off as an ethics issue for them. It only comes off as a means to feed the sheep and to get them to rally behind a certain point. With that said, Suris, what's your story? How did you become a skeptic? Did you ever deconvert from religion? And if you did, why?
So I grew up in a private school that was a non-denominational private school. I learned later that the reason it was non-denominational was because it wanted to grab people from all sects of Christianity, because there was a lot more money in that than having a nuanced belief system.
Yeah.
You can have a Catholic school, and that will give you, a subscribing base of 800 million people, but you could also have a non-denominational school, and that gives you a potential subscribing base of 1.8 billion people. So there's a lot more money in it, and the proof is I actually have a video on my channel for anybody who's interested that actually shows the school that I grew up in. It's essentially a giant compound.
Yeah.
Like it really is. I actually plan on going back there. Unfortunately, it stayed away. And doing a video series where I'm going to walk the halls and kind of relay some of my memories there, assuming I can get the permission from the principals to do so. They don't need to know about the channel. They just need to know that I'm doing a bit of a documentary on the school.
Yeah.
So I did grow up that way. And I remember some of my earliest biblical teachings were that of young earth creationism. I was specifically taught that the Bible was taken apart and all of the lineages were put together in a single string that equaled up to about 6,400 years. And that's apparently how we knew that the earth was 6,000 years old, because the Bible had that many lineages into it. So I was taught young earth creationism very, very early. I was also a King James onlyist. So I was, very, very deep into that hole. I didn't know that the King James version was written in, 1610. Or it was compiled in 1610. I didn't know that the documents it was based off of were from the late 1500s, which is still very far removed from the original documents.
Yeah.
I didn't know any of that at the time because we weren't taught it. We were just told that this is the version of the Bible you have to ascribe to, like a person in early Judeo spoke in Old English, apparently. So one of the first doors that helped me learn was actually two Christian sources. One was my grandpa. He was a heavily, I don't want to use the term indoctrinated, but a heavily influenced Christian. And his particular church subscribed to the NIV. And I said that the King James Version was the only true version of the Bible. He said, let's have this conversation again in 10 years. He didn't challenge me on it. And this was me as like a 6 or 7 year old kid, like early indoctrination. Let's have this conversation again in 10 years. And so 10 years later, we had the conversation. He said, do you remember this conversation we had when you were a kid about the King James Bible? Do you still hold that stance? And by that time, I'd actually taken the time to do research because I had a bunch of friends who were different denominations of Christian, sometimes pagan, Wiccans. Like I had friends from a myriad of faiths, so I started to learn that there might not be as much truth in the narrative that that's the only form of the Bible. That was one of the first doors out. The secondary door out that pulled me out of young earth creationism was when I finally got to high school. I was out of the private sector. I was now in the public education system. And in the public education system, my science teacher, my first science teacher that I had, was a Catholic. And remember, I was in a non-denominational school. So to me, Catholic was just as Christian as Baptist, as Presbyterian, as Methodist.
Mm-hmm.
To me, all Christians were created equal. They were all Christians.
Yeah.
So, and he told me that he believed in the theory of evolution, which to me sounded ludicrous because I grew up on the A. Becca literature. I don't know if you're familiar with their books, but they're a group of schooling books that are literally young earth creationist, narrative, academic, quote unquote, literature. And that's how I learned history, math, science, everything.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, what I was hearing was essentially crazy talk. It was like, you're a Christian, you believe in evolution. That doesn't make any sense. I grew up in a Christian school, and they said that evolution is wrong in every way, shape, and form. And after a while, I started to realize, actually, this person's a lot smarter than I am. He's my teacher. He's teaching me. I'm not the authority here. And he's a Christian, so it's not like he's a evil, satanic, secular source. This person actually does subscribe to this theory, and he's more learned here than I am. Maybe the theory actually holds weight. And then, of course, a few years later, I got into biology and other more nuanced forms of science and learned that, yeah, no, what I was taught in private school was a crock of force crap. And none of it actually held true the same way that I thought it did.
Yeah.
Now, none of that deconverted me out of Christianity, but it did kind of loosen the nuggets a little bit, or loosen the nuts a little bit.
Yeah.
And once I got out of school completely, for about 3 or 4 years, I spent my time, the exact phrase I would use, because I learned more about the Bible and learned that the way it was assembled might not necessarily hold that it's a really true narrative, because I learned about things like the Council of Nicaea, how the King James Version came to be, what the NIV was actually based off of, the older Catholic documents, and started to get to the point where I went, maybe the Bible's not true, but Christ is true. Like, Christianity could still hold true. It's just based off of a bunch of false documents. So I started saying, I don't believe the Bible's true, but I do believe in the Judeo-Christian God, was the exact verbiage that I would use. And then over time, that changed more into, maybe I'm a bit agnostic. Maybe I don't actually know. Because if I'm saying the Judeo-Christian God is true, but I'm saying that the Bible's not, what justification do I have for the Judeo-Christian God now? Where's the actual source here?
Right. And what age are you around this time?
Around this time, probably about 21, 22.
All right, go on.
And then finally, for the last 3 years, so leading up now, where I'm 26, just recently 26 as of this year. So last 3.5-ish years, I started to go, maybe I'm more of an atheist in the colloquial sense, not the philosophical sense, for the Stanford Dictionary pedantics out there, just to make sure that I don't have to jump into that snake pit.
Yeah.
But I started to go, maybe I'm more of an atheist. I don't just not believe in the Christian God. I don't wholly believe in any gods. I don't hold that any of them are really that true. So by that point, I said, okay, well, maybe I am an atheist. And it really didn't matter that much to me. It's just a position that I started to hold. Mm-hmm. Well, then I started discovering, within the last 1.5 years, I discovered channels like Cosmic Skeptic, Holy Kool-Aid, Godless Cranium, Genetically Modified Skeptic. And then after watching, like, pretty much digesting their entire libraries in a matter of weeks, then I said, well, they've mentioned a whole bunch of names that I don't know about. Let me go look at what these names are. So Aaron Ra, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens. So then I started digesting debates. And through that, I came across Matt Dillahunty and the Atheist Experience. And people can have their opinions on the show they want, but I ended up watching a lot of debates that Matt Dillahunty had with various people, be it creationist or otherwise. And after digesting several debates, from Dillahunty, one or two of the ones from Aaron Ra, the William Lane Craig, Lauren Krauss trifecta that happened, just pretty much going through anything that I could possibly digest, I realized a few things. One, not only am I an atheist, but I think there actually might be some truth that religion is causing more harm than I think.
Yeah.
Started doing some research into that, and as I started doing research into that and seeing, what actually is the history behind Mother Teresa, was she really that good of a person? Turns out she wasn't. um,
Oh no.
Going through all these things, I started to realize that maybe that term skeptic kind of does apply to me, because I'm not even taking these claims at face value. I'm going in and researching all of this stuff, and I'm finding all the information I possibly can here. So then I started to take the skeptic label. And then a little further down the line, as I started to watch channels like Godless Cranium and Vice Rhino more, I realized that maybe I could actually take their format that they are using, make it my own, and build my own channel out of it. So I took kind of a combination of the Godless Cranium, Vice Rhino format and the Apologia format, where he has the videos next to him and he's speaking as if it's a presentation. I kind of melded those together into what I use on my channel, where the avatar will look at the video and then look back at the audience, and there's animations every now and again, because I'm a horrible animator, but I still try because I think it's somewhat entertaining. I ended up falling into the YouTuber category of skepticism, and that's I guess the in the nutshell, in about 5 or maybe 10 minutes. I don't know how much time I spend on that answer to that question.
Yeah, so that's a great journey. I love your illustrious life. And I think the most important thing here, and this is what I tell some people sometimes when the conversation is allowed to go this far, I tell people, you need to listen to the other side. You don't have to do what the other side does, but if you want to be informed on where your position is on the spectrum of debating its veracity, you need to hear the other side.
Yes, 100%.
Absolutely. On almost all things that take an interest to me, when I find the other side, let's say I'm like, I would love to lean over here, like this is where I want to be. I will find the other side of the argument, and I'm astonished how I get pulled more this direction, because there's some correction there that takes place.
Yes.
So I tell people that when the conversation is allowed to get to that point, that, hey, you need to listen to the other side. There's a lot more information out there that you don't know, you're not even aware exists. And sometimes we're put in this predicament of stigmatizing or dehumanizing those persons who hold a position counter to our own. Yeah. And that will stop us from going into their arena and just listening and seeing what there is to be said, and then using that information to further inform our own position. All right. That said, I love your description. I love your journey there. What do you, when people learn that you are a skeptic, when they learn that you are a skeptic, what do you find that you have to dispel usually first before the conversation can progress?
So usually one of the first things that happens is you're asked, what kind of skeptic are you? And I've seen this happen a lot because I've been on other Christian channels. And I've been in their live streams, not just in the audience, but as part of the live stream, just like we're doing here, because I don't believe in echo chambers. I'll gladly hop on their channels, just as I'll have anybody hop on my channel, depending on the time slots available for it. And so typically what happens is I'll be asked, well, if you're an atheist, why are you this? Or if you're a skeptic, why are you this? And the first thing that always has to happen is you have to clarify, what kind of atheist are you and what do you mean by skeptic? Yeah. I don't have much issue with the skeptic part, because most people just go, okay, you're skeptical, and they move on from there. It also helps that a lot of the channels that I've been on have already been on my channel, or not been on, but have already watched my channel before. So it's not so hard for me to dispel that I'm not a skeptic, in the sense that I criticize everything and say that, oh, that's wrong, and I'm going to be cynical about everything. Because skeptic doesn't mean cynic. Apparently, a lot of people think that it does.
Well, okay, so why not? Okay, let's talk about that for just a second, because I think that's an interesting part of the spectrum that we're on. So you have the religious side, that their highest values are things like hope, faith, hope, and love, right? And those are great to have. And it's those values which are capitalized on by religion in the promises that are made, these faith-based claims, the promises that are made, and then used as incentives to participate in our religion, the host religion. Yeah. So you have that on one side, and if you to think about it linearly, if you keep going across, you go from this I believe in everything good, and I have faith in that it's all going to turn out and happen. You keep going across, and you get to a place where there's moderates in the middle, there's skeptics, there's agnostics, there's atheists, anti-theists, and if you keep traveling in that direction, Cyrus, you're going to get to a place that appears nihilistic. Yeah. Don't you think so?
There are a lot of ways that you can get there where you can say, well, a God doesn't exist, so there's no ultimate meaning, for instance. That's one of the big ones that we hear a lot, is that if there's God or afterlife, there's no ultimate meaning. You can get to a place of nihilism, not to be misconstrued with moral nihilism, which is a completely separate idea. But you can get to a place of nihilism very easily. The trick there is to realize that there are some things that you can hold to. So, for instance, for me, I'm not a nihilist because I do have things that I value, and there are things that I think do hold value to me. I enjoy my relationship. I enjoy my friendship. I enjoy video games. I can be a nihilist and still enjoy those things. But to say that none of those things ultimately matter, which there are some nihilists that will say, the keyword there being ultimately, I don't really ascribe to that, because to me, because I do believe that there's only the one life that we have, to me, ultimately really only encompasses this one life that I have. So ultimately, to me, my relationship has value. Ultimately to me, the experiences that I get from particular fictions have value. I don't need an afterlife or anything like that to see ultimately meaning that to me. I don't need to have any of that. So I can keep myself from getting to the nihilistic cynic section very easily by holding on to those things.
And those seem fairly easy to hold on to. After all, most of us can identify something meaningful in our lives. So we don't have to fear that being a skeptic or, moving that direction to, what is atheist, will actually make us nihilists or, cause us to question ultimate meaning in life, in so much as there's no meaning. For me personally, there's a safe place just outside of religion that still says it's okay to do whatever you want and to have pleasure in life. And what's the position that says life is all about pleasure? Do you know the term?
It's hedonism.
Hedonism. So some people, might be scared if they're coming from a religious point of reference that hedonism, this thing that a lot of religions actually, maybe condemn is a strong word, but warn, have caution against the hedonistic. I was just reading an article that a guy in our group gave over for us to read about Brahma and the self and, these ultimate things. And it's not unlike Christianity in almost every way, in so much as, you got to deny yourself and you got to have faith that this thing, the self or Brahma, through meditation, through faith, through belief, might confirm that you are ready for immortality. So the process seems completely, but I was struck by, you have to give up things, though. You have to give up your desires. You have to lower them down, and you have to ponder this attributeless, non-characteristic entity or agent. That's impossible. And go that direction. But anyways, all that to say, you cannot be religious and still find just as much meaning in your life, maybe sometimes more. It's hard to beat the ultimate I'm going to heaven and living forever in glory and saving people as I go feeling. But when you readjust your paradigm and you realize maybe that's true, maybe it's not, I'll be skeptical a little bit. But even if it's not, I've been living my whole life up to this point, without interference.
Well, that's kind of one of the problems you have with, say, if you're familiar with Pascal's wager, that's one of the big problems that Pascal's wager have is, one, you do lose something when you believe in that ultimate afterlife. And the thing you lose is how important this life is. For instance, if you're working so hard to get a reward in the afterlife and you're denying things to yourself, not to the point of, trying to just stay away from hedonism, but just denying basic things, you end up getting to a point where, let's say you die and there's nothing on the other side, you've now wasted the one life that you have.
Mm.
That's not even to get into the other problems with Pascal's wager, like how it's a false dichotomy.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother. We can have an entire video on that. But just based on the problem alone that is presented by, if you believe in this thing and you get in the afterlife, wouldn't that be wonderful? Well, yes, but if I'm sacrificing so much of my life and of my time, like just think about how much time you're taking in church. I understand that there's the community aspect of church, and you can have that. You don't necessarily need church for community, by the way. I grew up in a card shop. I played Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic the Gathering growing up. So to me, I have community by just having a game that I play with people all the time.
Yeah.
So the idea that I need a church or community is asinine to me. But aside from the community aspect, if you're spending 1 to 2 hours of your life every single Sunday, that's 52 hours a week, you have 100 plus hours per year. And let's say you live 80 years, you've now given up a very substantial amount of time, and you can't get it back, especially if at the end of that time, that's the end of your road. That time is gone completely. So, again, not even addressing the false dichotomy that Pascal's wager is, you do lose something here.
Yeah, for anybody watching right now, you can head over to fullydeconverted.com and look at our article, Pascal's Holy Casino, written by our writer, Zek. And it's a great article, so you can go find that. Share it on your social media right now. It's our writer, Zek, by the way. I mean, he's phenomenal. He does such a great job of pointing out what things actually look like, especially from an outsider perspective. So there's content. There's a plug there for the site. Suris, when a faith-based Christian tells you that they are indeed skeptical and they use reason, logic, and the higher cognitive functions that us humans are endowed with to arrive at their current faith-based position or belief, how might you respond?
So I'll probably, and I have seen this before, we actually have some very, very good thinkers in the scientific community who are Christian and were not Christian before and became Christian when they became scientists. A good example of this is Dr. Seigart. He's a biologist, and he's a very, very brilliant biologist, but he is a Christian. So typically what happens is, I don't know if you're familiar with the argument from contingency.
No, please help me out.
So the argument from contingency is, it's a subcategory of the cosmological argument. And the argument from contingency, basically, it's an apologetic argument for God, of course, which comes in its very, very weird and particular flavor of jumping the gun. So for instance, I can actually bring it up right now, and you can break it down into 5 syllogistic premises. The first one is that all things that exist contingently or have a reason for their existence. Premise 2 is the universe exists contingently, which, I mean, yeah, it's contingent on the first cause, so we can grant that. Therefore, the universe has a reason for its existence. Okay, whatever. Premise 4, if the universe has a reason for its existence, then that reason is God. Here's where we have a bit of a jump of the gun.
Yeah, jump. Yeah, I caught it.
Here. And then the 5th part of the entire syllogism is therefore God exists, which happens all the time when you've got arguments like this, or the moral argument, or anything like that. So what happens here is they have, especially when you have a person like Seigart, who the more they studied science went, well, I can't explain this infinite number of things, therefore God. It's the same type of logical jump. This is what happens when, I forget who said it, but when there was a very, very, astronomy is not my strong suit, so I don't know any of the terminology, and I apologize for that. But there was a particular telescope that was built, and they said that looking out into the universe through the telescope was like looking at God. The problems you get here is, one, which God? You can't really isolate a particular God there. And 2, you can say it's like looking at God, but we don't really have a good working definition of God to begin with. So how can you say it's like looking at something? Where's your comparison?
Yeah.
It's like looking at the idea of this thing that I think might exist. But then the thing you're looking at might be something completely different. It just looks like your particular subjective idea here. So my answer to a person of science like this, or like Dr. Seigart, would be, I can understand how you got here, because I do understand certain arguments, like the argument from contingency, how people can get to that conclusion, because they can't think of anything else that can get you there. So God is inserted. I can understand how you got there. It wouldn't necessarily convince me to get there, though. And I think that's where the sticking point is. They can have that belief if they want. And if they use rationality to get themselves to that belief, which you can, sure, why not? You are there. But if that same rationality can't get me there, it has no pragmatic use for me.
And therefore society by extension, right?
Therefore society by extension, yes. This is why you have, there are some people that reading the Bible brings them into Christianity, and there are some people who reading the Bible bring them completely out of Christianity. The same level of logic won't necessarily lead two different people to the same exact conclusion.
Yeah. Man, I'm trying to look for a way to validate religious experiences in so much as people can rationalize and use logic to kind of affirm or double down what they're actually experiencing in that moment. And it often comes, I think, Suris, when we lose our descriptive ability to categorize our presently held experience. You know, induced experiences by drugs, maybe. You know, I keep hearing about these things.
Yeah.
You know, I've had my own experience with drugs. I don't think for an instant I would have said I met God, or even if you take that experience over to dreams, where I have dreamed about what was my God at the time. You know, I woke up from those things feeling profound feelings, but knew I could never actually like write my own Bible about it. You know, like it's not quite there. But sometimes we try to make that leap, Suris, from a feeling that we have, an experience that our framework that we've been given in life thus far leaves that experience for us quite inexplicable. Like we don't exactly know where it falls into our boundaries of, you know, how much of this might be something I don't fully understand, therefore God, and how much of this is explainable, but with just a little bit more information.
Yeah.
And sometimes we go down those roads. I understand also how it can be tricky, and you want to kind of reach out into the darkness and pull back something you're hoping to be true. I get that.
Yeah, and typically what happens is you've got two schools. There's one school where it's a logical fallacy, which would make it an argument from incredulity, that says, I don't know how to explain this except with God. Which, yeah, I have incredulity that there's no other way this could work except with a God. This happens a lot with first cause arguments. How could the universe come into existence without a God? Or you have the other school of thought where it's not necessarily a logical fallacy, but I would say that the entire school is bunk, would be presuppositionalism. So with a presuppositionalist, if you're familiar with Cy Ten Bergenkate, for instance, they base their entire groundwork that they start with God and then they work out from there. They can be a lot more logically consistent. They can be a lot more rationally consistent within the framework of philosophy, but they're still working from what I would say is a very flawed framework, because I could presuppose any God. I could presuppose Allah. I could presuppose Christ. I could presuppose Vishnu. I could presuppose the morality sharding unicorn, for instance. And in any of these scenarios, I've presupposed a God and I've worked out from there, but now I'm looking through a lens, and things can be very distorted through that lens. If anybody's familiar with Ken Ham's famous methodology for archaeology, I look at the archaeology through the biblical lens, and that's why he was the young earth creationist, because that lens is incredibly distorted. So even though they can be more logically consistent through that framework, it doesn't make them right. You can have a very logically consistent argument that is still wrong. This is why you have syllogisms that are sound but not valid.
All right, Suris the Skeptic, I'm going to ask you a few questions, okay? I want to test your skepticism, all right? So, you're going to have to endure this line of questioning here. Are you ready?
Absolutely. You seem to have froze. Huh, the entire stream has frozen. That's strange. Yep, it definitely froze. Wonder if I catch this stream up. Am I still here? Oh. Awkward. I am here. This is very strange. So I guess this is just because I guess this just became a one-man show. So sorry, guys. I've definitely deconverted out of my atheism, which is obviously a religion, because obviously God took away our host. Here we are. No, I'm kidding. I definitely haven't. So that is very strange that it just completely broke. I feel very bad. I have no way of turning the live stream off. I haven't a single one. But here we are. I guess I can scroll up since there's not a host asking me questions now. I can scroll up and look through the chat questions. So Bud Askins, you had asked earlier what I thought about the Catholics who were essentially defending sex offenders. And I think if there's evidence that they are sex offenders, then they're morally abhorrent. I think there's really not much more that needs to be said on that. And as for can I twerk, I cannot. I do not have the ability to.
Suris, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
I don't know what just happened there. Yeah, that was really weird.
What happened is I deconverted out of my atheism, which is obviously a religion, because God threw away. So I now have evidence of God.
Yeah, my whole YouTube account just kicked me out. I just signed back in. Really weird. Okay.
We're live at the time, so I did one-man show for a little bit. Zero.
Yeah, I've done that before too. And all right, here we go. A line of questions, and we're going to test your skepticism. Are you ready?
Sure.
All right. Santa, real or not?
As far as I can tell, not real.
All right, we're going to keep going. Okay. Tooth Fairy.
As far as I can tell, again, not real.
All right. Don't think that I don't have some hard ones coming up. All right, so don't. Okay. Bunny Rabbit, Easter Bunny Rabbit.
Well, I've definitely bought some chocolate ones at the store, so that one must be real.
Okay. All right, I can tell we're getting some more. Jesus was born on Christmas Day.
I think we have plenty of evidence that that didn't happen.
All right. Easter is a celebration of a true historical God who both killed himself and resurrected himself.
That one, definitely, we don't have enough supporting evidence for. We have celebration that it is, in its current form, can be used as a celebration of that, or it can be a celebration of the Easter Bunny as a method of capitalism. But do we have historical evidence of the actual resurrection event that led to that celebration? Not necessarily.
Okay.
And is that even the source of the celebration to begin with? That also, I do not know.
Okay. All right. I can see you don't just accept these. All right. Well, moving on. When Rhonda pays her rent on time, it is in fact a miracle of God.
I would say that probabilistically, it's just as likely that it's a miracle as that it's just the fact that she got paid on time. Could be a brute fact.
Okay. All right. So, all right. Probabilities there. Okay. Faith-based and miracle healers on social media and YouTube are actually responsible for reconstructing injured biology.
That one I've actually done a video on. I've done research into that one, and that is evidently not true.
I don't like when you say it's evidently not true. That hurts a little bit when you say that, because that it'll kind of suck then that people aren't really getting healed miraculously. It would suck, Cyrus.
Oh,
So,
it definitely sucks, but the fact that they are not getting healed miraculously can lead them down the road of accepting more tried and true medicine that could possibly get them healed, which would definitely lead us to having fewer dead kids.
all right, moving on, Cyrus. You're kind of a tough crowd right now. Okay. If I say something out loud, it's true. Kind of like when I pray to be saved by a almighty God. If I say it out loud, it's true.
Not necessarily. I can say that I am green out loud, and the fact that I'm there, for one, I can't demonstrate the color of green is even real. For two, I can't even demonstrate that I'm green, but I have said the thing out loud, and it's definitely not true.
Okay. All right. When I go for a very brief swim in a ritualistic hot tub, God comes to actually live inside of me.
Can you demonstrate that? And even if you could, how would you do so?
You're being a little skeptical right now. I don't appreciate it. I have a personal relationship with a creator deity who, despite my prayers and desires, will surely send those whom I love that don't believe in him to suffer eternally in ways that I can't imagine, and thankfully enough, will be wiped from my memory when I go to heaven.
Well, I can say that I believe that you believe that. Right? If the hypothetical you, that is obviously not the real you right now, I believe that that hypothetical you believes that. But I don't believe that that's necessarily true. Not only has this afterlife not been demonstrated, even if you can somehow reason it into existence via philosophical metaphysics, even if you could conceive it, you can't demonstrate that this particular creator is the one that exists. And you can't demonstrate this particular creator is so petty and vindictive that he would. If you can't demonstrate these things, you could believe it all you want, but I ought not to.
All right. I feel like that was a full assault there on pretty much all the things that make up today's modern Christianity. And it seems like you're reasonably skeptic. So you've passed the test, Cyrus.
I did say the Easter Bunny was real, and that a chocolate one existed that I digested.
When I was a kid, I ate this full, to me, it was huge, pure chocolate Easter. I mean, the thing was half of like the length of my body, and I went into the sugar state. I don't want to call it anything like too serious, but it messed me up, man. Cyrus, where can people find you, my friend?
So people can find me on Twitter at Suris Skeptic, or you can go to my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Suris Skeptic. One word on both of them. I also have a Facebook page, which is linked in any of my videos. And if you are on my channel, then you will actually see links to my Twitter feed, as well as links to my Discord channel in there as well. So any method you could possibly have to reach me, including email address, if you want to get that personal, those are there on my channel as well. So if you go there first, you'll find all the other links.
Cyrus, I went on your channel and I plugged most of what you just said. So if you're watching right now, it's in the description. You can go find Cyrus through there. Cyrus, it's been a pleasure with you. Thank you for the conversation. Thank you for aiding in the conversation, which allows us to disenfranchise dogma and kind of treat truth as its own authority, and use a critical eye when we're trying to be a little bit more skeptical about our most cherished and valued beliefs or otherwise. So thank you for coming on, Cyrus. Tell everybody bye.
Thank everybody who's actually been here watching today. Thank you guys for the questions you put into the live chat as well. I enjoyed engaging with the ones I had time to do so. I hope you all have a wonderful night.